Okay, so in this video we're going to start talking about how we graph non-linear inequalities. So now instead of being a line, we're going to run into quadratics and things possibly in the future, maybe that are not linear as well outside of quadratics. So starting off here with this first problem, I have y is less than x squared minus 4x plus 3. So this one we can see on the right hand side here is a quadratic. So in order to graph this, before we can think about our shaded or solid or dashed lines or which side to shade and all that stuff, we've got to get that quadratic graph. Remember that parabola. So we've got to use our methods that we learned in the previous units of how do we get the vertex, how do we get the x-intercepts, how do we get the y-intercept. That's all the stuff we're going to need here. So starting with this first one here, I'm going to see it's an x squared minus 4x plus 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use completing the square here because I have no coefficient in front of the x squared. And I'm going to be trying to find the vertex and the x-intercepts here. So I'm going to use completing the square. Remember, to complete the square here, you put x squared in the bottom left. That minus 4x, we're going to split up between the two. So minus 2x. And then we factor. I have x and x. X times minus 2 is negative 2x. X times minus 2 is negative 2x. Now, negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4 in the upper right-hand corner. I'm at 4, but I want to be back at a positive 3. So think about how can you get from 3 where you want to be to where you're at now. Well, I'm at 4. I want to get back to 3. I have to minus 1. So now our inequality is going to be y is less than x minus 2, quantity squared, minus 1. But when we do this now, after we complete the square, we don't want to worry about that inequality right now if we're just trying to find the parabola. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine this is an equal sign right now. So I'm going to just replace it with an equal sign because that's how we have always solved for our vertex, our x-intercepts, and everything like that. So starting off there, though, now that we're in our vertex form, we know what the vertex is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solve for that. Remember, the vertex is the x value is opposite inside the parentheses, so opposite of a negative 2 is a positive 2. The y value is exactly on the outside, that's the negative 1. So we have our vertex now. Now I'm going to get my x-intercepts. Remember, to get the x-intercepts, you need to put 0 in for y. So I'm going to take 0, I'm going to replace my y value with it. I'm going to have x minus 2, quantity squared, minus 1. Now I'm going to solve, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides, plus 1, plus 1. I have 1 equals x minus 2, quantity squared. Now I'm going to get rid of my squared by taking the square root. So this is all what we did in the last chapter. Square root of 1 is 1, or it is a negative 1. And then when we're going to set equal to both of those is the x minus 2. So I have x minus 2 equals 1, and I'm going to have x minus 2 equals a negative 1. And we solve each of these, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides on both of these. So we get x is 3, and then we get x, so I plus 2 on this one, we get x is 1, and it's a positive 1. So our x-intercepts are going to be 3, 0, and 1, 0. So we now have both those. So that was all a review from before. Now we also need the y-intercept. Okay, so I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to do this in red on the left. So I'm going to get my y-intercept here. Remember, to get the y-intercept, you need to put 0 in for x. I'm going to go back in the original, and I'm going to go back to the very original up here where I put the red star. And I'm going to replace it with an equal sign like we did. That's what will still be the same. So we're going to have y equals. But remember, when you're solving for the y-intercept, you're going to put 0 in for x. So I'm going to say y equals 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 3. So this is exactly like we've been doing in finding those y-intercepts. Put 0 in for x this time, but it's the equal to. We're not going to worry about the inequality right now. And when you solve this, this whole right-hand side turns to 3. So our y-intercept is going to be 3, so I'm going to write that over here on below this where I have all my other points. My y-int is 0 for my x, 3 for my y. Now that we have all our coordinates, we can go ahead and graph this. So we're going to go 2, negative 1, plot that point. Okay, we're going to go 3, 0, 1, 0, 0, 3. So I went ahead and I plotted all these points. Now don't forget, you have your line of symmetry here. So remember, that goes through that vertex, so you can find that point symmetrical, which will be right here with that y-intercept. Okay. Now that we have that, now we can start considering about our shaded and solid line. Sorry, not shaded, our solid or dashed line. So look back at the very original inequality, and I see it's just, I'm going to circle it in blue here. It is a less than. So that means on my inequality, I'm going to make this a dashed parabola. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to make a dash parabola to the best of my ability. Okay, so I'm dashing it, and trying to do my best I can to make that U shape there. And we now have our parabola. Now it's just like when we had our linear stuff. We're going to use our inequality, our original inequality, okay? And we're going to put in for that, we're going to pick a coordinate, and we want to pick one off of the parabola. And remember, if we can, we like to use 0, 0. So we're going to run our test now. I'm running my test down in blue here. We're going to test this in the original. And remember, we're testing 0, 0 here because it's not on the parabola. It's off of there. And it's going to help us figure out which side to shade. Okay, so we're going to put 0, 0 in for x and y. So we're going to put 0 is less than 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 3. All right, so now that we have this here, oops, I guess that's a changing color one. So on the right-hand side here, 0 squared minus 4 times 0 is plus 3. Though that's the same thing as the y-intercept. That was 3. And then we have 0, so I bring my sign down. That was the question. Is that the same? Is 0 less than 3? And yes, it is. So I'm going to go to my parabola. I'm going to find 0, 0, and I locate it. I'm going to shade where 0, 0 is because 0, 0 worked. I gave myself a big check mark. And since 0, 0 is on the bottom outside part of the parabola, I'm going to shade the bottom outside part of the parabola. Now, it's not only just that one side, though. You need to go all the way around it. Okay, it even includes that right-hand side because that's on the outside. If 0, 0 did not work, we would have shaded on the inside part. Okay, but since it did not work, or since it did work, we want it to work, so we're going to shade all around it on the outside. And there we have graphed our inequality now for this parabola. Okay, so this one was using completing the square.